Welcome back to the Social Work Race, guys. You are on the platform that has real life discussions about what it is to be on the front line in social care, also health and social care. Of course, is all about the frontline workers. So, welcome back to the channel. I want to welcome my friend Serena. She is an employee of the NHS, so she's going to be giving us some insight into what it's like on the front line. Serena, thank you for coming.
No problem.
I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself.
Sure.
Yeah, if you don't mind blowing your own trumpet.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I work in the NHS. This is going to be my 8th year in the NHS, which feels crazy to say, and it's something that I always knew I wanted to be in some kind of healthcare patient situation. I thought for a minute I wanted to be a doctor, and kind of God led me in that. And I ended up falling into the degree which I did, which is respiratory and sleep physiology. I then it was actually respiratory and cardiology, but you choose which one you specialize in. I wanted to do cardiology, but again, God said we're going to turn this way, and I ended up in respiratory and sleep physiology. Was placed in an incredible hospital. And have been working there ever since, and have been lucky enough to, or blessed enough to, have my career there and proceed. What's the word?
Progress.
Progress. There we go.
Yeah.
Progress from being a junior to senior, and now I'm a chief physiologist, working with senior management. Yeah, chief. It's so funny. Like, my brother gets onto me all the time for that time.
It sounds like the Starship Enterprise, the chief.
It definitely does.
Are you running the Starship Enterprise? Is the question.
Not quite. No. At the moment, I'm deputizing as deputy head, because deputy head is on maternity leave. And then we've got our head of department as well. So yeah, I've been in this career. I was explaining to you earlier, like, that my job is slightly different in that to most physiologists and most hospitals, in that I work in a tertiary hospital, so we see exclusively respiratory cases, and so it's a much smaller hospital. It does change some things. Generally, once people get there, they don't work anywhere else. I'm a prime example of that. So they just kind of stay with their whole entire career in this particular hospital, because it is so specialist. And so it is slightly different, but I think a lot of the issues that the NHS is facing across the board is stretching to us as well.
I'm suspecting, because I've always dipped my toe into the issues of around health, whether it be natural health and conventional, and I'm suspecting, tell me if I'm wrong, that respiratory diseases are probably on the increase, or
So it's, well, with COVID, that's one that has come out of nowhere. That's a respiratory disease that nobody still has a complete handle on or understanding of. The one thing, I say to everyone that I know is the lungs are the one organ that if you mess them up, that's it. Like, there's treatments to help your symptoms, but there's no reversing the damage that has been done. And it's, what surprises me is the dip that we saw in smoking, and then now, like, the rise that we're seeing in smoking is...
Now this is it. I'm always looking for these interesting facts. Now, what's going on? Vaping.
Vaping, and I think people are stressed out. People are smoking marijuana and spliffs and all of that. I wonder if it's because the world kind of has this apocalyptic feel to it, that people don't believe that they're going to make it to 80, 70, and so they just think, I'm going to live my life anyway. I do wonder if that has an impact for the younger generations that we see, deciding to partake in these things despite knowing what it will do to your body, not what it can do, what it will do. It's always been very interesting, the decisions sociologically that our community is making.
So
Yeah,
this is a side issue before we get into it, but I whenever I speak to young people, and the vast majority do use cannabis,
yeah,
um, they believe that it's not that bad for you because it's natural.
they do. Yeah.
So maybe you could just give us a little kind of a lesson on what.
I say to everyone that I know that decides to use cannabis, I understand. That's what I say firstly, because I think what people don't recognize is that there's so much about our behaviors that's emotional, and there's a lot to cope with at the moment. And so I understand. If you have anxiety and that's something that helps you to manage it, I understand. But what I beg people to do, go back, get your chemistry book, learn about dosing, and cook it. Make it into a brownie. Please don't smoke it. And the reason why I say that is because it doesn't. They now reckon that one spliff is equivalent to 10 cigarettes.
Why?
Because you inhale and you hold.
And
So
cigarettes are
within your lungs. They don't have the research, and they don't have the research because we don't have the time. So what helped us to what helped the scientific community to pinpoint lung cancer, and lung cancer is one side of it, but the other side of it is something called chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is COPD.
Which is?
And those, so essentially what it means is that your airways become tighter than they should be. So if you're healthy, you've got nice and open airways, your air flows through wonderfully, no problems. As inflammation happens because of smoke inhalation over time, those airways slowly begin to close and close and close and close and close.
So breathing becomes difficult.
Your body, say that again?
Breathing becomes difficult.
Breathing becomes difficult. If you're unlucky, it damages the lung tissue as well at the same time, and you end up with a branch of that called emphysema. And if you're lucky, it's just your airways. But I say lucky because they're irreversible diseases. Very often, these sorts of patients are not necessarily eligible for transplant because the decline is so gradual. By the time you catch it, you're too sick to go for transplant anymore. So it really isn't worth it. I say to everyone, there's a reason why in California they have these shops and they sell cookies and brownies and all sorts of different ways to consume marijuana, and with specific doses. Learn it and do it, please, 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 please.
You mean, so what you're saying, let's be clear about what you're saying. I mean, this is your personal opinion, and it's in preference to destroying your lungs. Yeah, but it's not that you advocate either. It's just that this is probably the best option.
Exactly, because I think sometimes it's very easy to sit on a high horse and say, why don't you just give it up? Do you know what I mean? When actually that could be the thing that is getting you out of bed and to work every day. That it could be the thing that allows you to engage in certain situations. So I don't want to say just to give it up, because I think that's blasé and isn't really. And I'm saying this with ignorance, because for all a guest, you might have like a gastro person on here and they'll be like, no, please don't eat it, it'll mess up your stomach lining and your entire GI tract. But from my perspective, you just, it's not worth it. It's just not worth messing up your lungs.
Without getting too much into the politics of it, I appreciate very much that you can see why people may do this. And so working in a hospital, you're surrounded by sick people.
Yeah.
And so you have to develop a level of insight as to why.
Yeah.
What has informed your your insight? And again, we haven't even started the topic yet, but hey, it doesn't matter. What has informed your level of insight when it comes to empathy for those who are addicted to smoking, whatever they smoke, and vaping as well? Is vaping in that bracket as well? I don't know.
Yeah, so vaping is an unknown at the moment. What they reckon is that it leads to. I personally just wouldn't do it.
Mm.
Uh, they don't think it's been sold as a solution, but they don't have enough time to know what it's actually going to do to the lungs.
Yeah.
There's some studies that suggest that it causes your cells to actually mutate. And then you end up with, so there's two types of respiratory diseases. Sorry if I'm getting too technical, but there's obstructive respiratory diseases, which is to do with your airways getting tighter, as I mentioned, and then there's restrictive diseases, and there's kind of two main what's the word? Branches.
Okay. Branches,
these.
yeah, cool.
Yeah. And areas of these. And the two main areas are either like you've got muscle or structural issues, or you've got something called fibrotic disease, which is where the lung tissue itself thickens up. It's like scar tissue. You know, if you get a really bad cut
Then it's
and
thicker.
you end up with this horrible scar, you can feel it, it's raised, it's hard. And if you have it in the wrong place, it may not even stretch as well, right? That's exactly what happens in the lungs. So you end up with fibrotic disease. And some of the research, this was, I think I went to a conference about 5 years ago. Some of the research was suggesting potentially it might push patients, rather than in the obstructive pattern, because it's vapor and interacting at a cellular level, that it might actually push patients towards a fibrotic, especially when you start, shisha is something that's similar, and when you start playing with a lot of flavors and chemicals, that's particularly where you're, it's a bit of an unknown.
So your insight into the whole need for people, and this is a very personal thing from a healthcare perspective. I mean, a deeper insight into that. Tell me a bit more about what you think about why people are doing
I think for me, I'm somebody who I have a very strong judgment thread in me, and always have. And it comes in handy because it means I'm quite good at making decisions. But it also means that I can quite quickly jump to conclusions. And I think really it's God taking me on a journey and humbling me that has shown me that actually, yes, I may not have addictions that are killing me, but my sugar addiction is next level. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm still using something to cope with the things that are happening emotionally.
You're doing the same thing.
I'm doing exactly the same thing.
But it's probably more acceptable, right?
Exactly. My Amazon delivery man knows me by name. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's just it just is socially acceptable, or maybe not having as a detrimental effect on my physical body, but we're going through exactly the same mental battles, all of us. All of us are going through exactly the same mental battles. Some people, they actually end up being addicted to exercise. Do you know what I mean? Something that's really, or being addicted to dieting, or being addicted to spirituality, or being addicted to, you can be addicted to anything. And I think when I saw the fullness of my own self and how I deal with things, it allowed me to see other people and know they just picked up a different thing than me.
Right. A less socially acceptable habit.
Yeah.
For which many people in, say, America are serving life sentences for.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. That's tough.
Yeah. Whilst others are making millions and billions of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. It is. I would agree with you, and I think I think working with people has given me more insight into myself, and I perfectly agree with that example of the fact that I have my own thing. In fact, I try so hard to not be addicted to anything, but everybody's got something, right, that they lean toward. I remember when I became vegetarian in 2005.
Okay.
And You know, as soon as I did that, my diet wasn't good anyway, but as soon as I did that, I was then addicted to crisps because when I was out, what was I going to buy? And I was eating copious. That was when Sensations first came out, the big bag, right, of
Yeah,
crisps. And I would eat one, maybe two of those a day, easily,
yeah,
for years. And I
yeah,
was teaching people how to be well. So I
yeah.
get it. I was a part of that, and I like where you came from there. Um, unless you had anything else to say on the topic, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think it's something that just what I will say, because there are certain addictions I have broken. Do you know what I mean?
Mm,
Shopping for a long time was one of them, and I think don't run from the emotions
yeah,
because
yeah,
that's what it is, isn't it? We're all just running from whatever the feeling is, trying to mask that feeling. But I
yes,
think
yeah,
that if you're honest with yourself, it's much easier to take that step towards
yeah.
getting rid. So yeah, but I beg people, like, please eat it, drink
Instead,
it.
instead,
Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? Just
Mm.
please, 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 please
So
don't
I guess
stop.
I guess when you see people come through the door, you're just looking at people trying to cope.
Yeah, most of the time,
Mm,
especially in because that so half of respiratory disease, I may it's not half, but half of the patients that I see with respiratory disease is self-inflicted, and the other half they've had no option at all whatsoever. It's
okay.
just idiopathic, or it's congenital, or it's just come out of nowhere.
Mm,
Um, and so yeah, 100%. We're just all of our patients are literally just trying to cope.
yeah,
A
that
lot
makes
of
sense.
the ones who smoke massively regret it.
Mm,
And they will all say, "You don't smoke, do you?" Do you know what I mean? When we're testing them and seeing them. Um,
mm,
yeah.
that's deep.
Mm.
And moving on to the topic really that we wanted to look at, what it's like behind the curtain of the NHS. And I know you work in a more specialist field, but
Mm.
you will have more insight than many. Um, what what is an issue or some of the issues that you're finding that you wish were fixed or being fixed, being
Yeah.
addressed as we look at the NHS?
Yeah. I think ooh, there's so
Oh, that
many.
laugh, that laugh.
There's so many. I think one of the major ones that I'd love to get fixed is the wastage. There is an unbelievable amount of wastage in
Mm,
in our system.
mm, mm.
Unbelievable. We consistently every day have between 4 to 8 cancellations, or they haven't shown up, or
So I could say,
last.
if they haven't shown up, just move on to the next patient,
Yes, but you can't fill them. They've got to be booked in. Do you know what I mean? And because we are a tertiary specialist centre, these are patients coming from all over the country. There's patients in Scotland. I can't call someone from Scotland and be like, "Hiya, any chance you can get here for 3 p.m. this afternoon?" You
mm,
know,
mm.
there is an incredible amount of wastage. Not even just from that perspective, but just even from our technologies behind. We started using Teams in the pandemic.
Yeah.
Teams has been around for a minute and a half.
Mm.
We started using Teams in the pandemic. All of the software is behind. Um, our, our hospital moved to whichever Microsoft. It's not even the newest one, but the only reason we moved is
Don't tell me you
because
just came off Microsoft XP. Don't tell me.
whichever Microsoft it is. I'm an Apple girl, so I don't know the names for all the
Right?
different things, but whichever Microsoft it is, Microsoft had actually put out an announcement to say we're stopping supporting this system. You need to move, and that's the only reason why we moved.
Uh,
Do you know what I mean? It's just like, yes, you're saving money, but you're not really in the long run. Because if you
mm,
upgrade and you use the systems that are available and they're faster, you'd
mm,
save money. And so that the masses of waste. that happen in the NHS.
And
Just from,
you're
you
talking
go
about
to
physical waste as well.
physical waste. I mean, our department specifically moved to a paperless system probably about 5 years ago now, but it was painful. It was painfully hard to persuade people to let go of paper. Painfully hard. And there's no motivation for people to want to move on. Because the thing about the NHS, I think this is the side that everyone doesn't talk about. You can get into an NHS job, and unless you kill someone, you're not getting fired, really.
Oh, right, I get you.
Because it takes so much to fire someone, so much paperwork, so much you have to go through this, and then you have to prove that you've given them training and da 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 da. So once you're in a job, you get decent
You
holiday.
could do a bad job and nothing, nobody's on your
Nothing.
case.
And you can do it at the same time. You can then also do a very, very good job. And aside from your own moral compass, there's no reward for that. There's no, oh, here's a bonus for doing really well. There's no.
And we only care about money here, to be honest. Just money will do.
But there's nothing you can do. So if someone's doing a really good job and you think, yes, this person is ready to be a senior, and we've lost so many staff because of this reason, because they're a junior, they're prepared to be a senior, they've put in the work, they're incredibly good at their jobs, but we don't have a position. So they then get a job somewhere else.
So let's talk about
staffing.
So let's talk about staffing. How's that?
Yeah, staffing is difficult. It's continuously a struggle, and I can't see it getting better. Is the sad thing. I think, well, to a degree, I think there are things that can be done to help, but yeah, it's and I think the issue with a high staff turnover in clinical areas is that you have a dilution of knowledge, because simply from being in this department for 8 years now, there's certain things that I just know and I can't really say, oh, this person taught me, or yes, I learned this at this stage because of X,
picked it up from experienced people along the way.
Yeah, I just know, because it's just part of the experience, and you just gather it. And when people are moving every year or every 2 years, you lose a lot of that knowledge.
Yeah.
And so I think that's.
Well, why do you think that you initially have a staffing issue? What's the cause of the move on? What do you think is going on there?
Sadly, it is money.
What do you mean? Not enough, or? Yeah,
I think so. I work in my hospital's in central London. I'm not going to say which hospital I work in, just because. But yeah, my hospital's in central London, which means, number one, you've got to pay for travel.
Yeah.
So if you don't live in zone 2,
1, 2, yeah,
or 1, I don't know nobody that lives in zone 1.
I don't know anyone either.
If you don't live in zone 1 or 2, you're paying a pretty penny to get into work. Then if you decide to go and move out to, I remember when I was looking at moving, and I was thinking, oh, okay, at the time this was in the pandemic, so we had all of the wonderful free things that they were throwing at us. We had free parking, free this, free that. So I was driving into work. Beautiful time for commuting. And I thought, oh yeah, like I could move to like Milton Keynes and travel in. And then I said, all right, let me just look at the train prices to get from.
Okay, bad option. No. Oh wow. So you might as well just live in zone 1 and pay the extra rent.
Genuinely. No, it legitimately is that much money. Legitimately that much money. And so I was just thinking, what manner of madness? Who is paying this?
Yeah.
But people are. They're paying that, but they're paying that for corporate jobs, and they're paying that where they can claim back their travel. Do you know what I
Okay,
mean?
so that's the difference there.
It's the difference. Yeah, it's not coming out of their hand to mouth money. It's not coming out of their paycheck necessarily every month, and so there's that. There's the travel, as you mentioned, the cost of living in London. So whereas before people could maybe rent, I don't know, a 45-minute walk away, because
Yeah,
areas like Shepherd's Bush weren't too pricey. Now
can't
you
afford it,
can't
right?
even breathe in those areas without you
Wow.
can't. There's nowhere you can park. I was like, okay, maybe I'll rent a parking space near where I work, and then I'll drive in. Like, I'll go live in Reading or somewhere. And the parking spaces rent alone, it was like renting a one-bed apartment.
Yeah,
It
that's right.
like just insane. So I
Mm,
think everyone reaches a point where, okay, I'm now, let's say, 35. I don't want to live with strangers anymore. I'm not married, and I don't want to live in a house share. Do you know what I mean? Uh, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to get a job in zone one, getting
mm,
30 grand a year, and only be able to live in a house share. That doesn't make sense. I'm going to go look for work elsewhere. Or they do get married and they have a child, and now it's like, okay, I we can only afford to buy a house in Kent, in Berkshire, in wherever. So we're going to
yeah,
move out of London.
yeah,
I'm commuting for a little bit, but I don't see my child. This
yeah.
is horrible.
Mm,
Okay, I need to leave. I can't afford to come in here. The cost, I think we're not looking at the cost of not just living, but just the cost of actually how much it costs to get
work.
into work,
The cost of working.
the
Yeah.
cost of working, and the sacrifice of working as well. Because
Mm,
nobody comes into the NHS thinking, yes, I'm going to make millions. Do you know what I mean?
mm,
It's just not where you go.
mm.
But you should, at a minimum, be able to live at a minimum.
So you suspect or believe or observe, I don't know which one, but it could be all of those, that people are leaving because it's, number one, because it's costly.
I think so.
And so you have a high staff
In
turnover.
my specific situation, I
Yeah.
reckon in local hospitals, if you live out in Salisbury and you work in your local hospital, that's a different situation.
Mm.
Um,
It is. I guess London is going to suffer probably in a particular way, or city hospitals are going to
I
suffer.
think so, yeah. I think so. And I don't really um, know what the solution is. Part of the solution has always been the high cost area service that you get if you work in a central London or outer London hospital. You do get a bump, but
Mm.
that bump is not covering a travel card.
Mm.
Yeah, so I think that's a big part of it, for why people are leaving. I think the other half of it, I think Brexit had a massive
Mm.
impact, and then Brexit followed by COVID had a massive
Yeah.
impact on morale.
Yeah.
People, a lot of our staff, not my specific staff, but in our trust, are Europeans. They're not English people. They're not
Oh,
British
so let's look
people.
at that dynamic. Can we touch on that?
Mm.
The racial makeup. What are you looking at with your eyes in your
So
staff?
it again difficult in my specific department, and in my trust. My trust is pretty bad in terms of diversity, but the reason for that is because it's an elitist trust.
Can you say this?
Maybe not. I'm gonna say it anyway because it's not. I don't think we're not reflective of a. Yeah, we're not reflective of a standard trust.
This is not life. If you want me to take it out, I'll take it out.
Let's
But
take it out.
all right, cool, cool. All right.
Um,
So I guess my question was, how diverse is your staff allocation, or what's it looking like? Is there a lot of minorities, Europeans, British, Africans, native? What are you looking at when you
yeah, it's
look
not. So it's not great. They did a statistics and they looked at bandings, right? So generally NHS bands are is it 1 to 9
Okay.
NHS bands? I'm not sure if it actually starts at 1 or not, but the upper bands are 9. I know that for sure. And I think 54% of our staff across the board are ethnic minorities. When you then look at band 7 and above, that percentage drops to like 3% or something like
I
that.
think I knew that. I don't know what,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah, and
yeah.
we don't want tokenism, but it's something that needs to be talked about. I don't know if we're going to talk about it much today, but it does need to be because it's funny because yeah, in my current team, I'm leaving them now. A great team, awesome team. It's mostly minority.
Mm.
I worked in another local authority in North London. It was all minority, apart from one.
Oh wow.
That's the staff and before management.
Okay.
And the management up there, from there, just team leaders were, white.
Yeah.
Then you've where I work, managers, team leaders, then management. It's all black. And I guess when you go further up, it's white. And I think that's where it's going to be for a while. I'm
Yeah.
not really upset with that because I can't complain. But in where I work, it's just black. Whatever black means, it's just not white. And
That's
again, I'm not
so
complaining.
yeah. That's
Beautiful
completely
people.
alien to. I've never worked in a space like that. Never.
Mm, mm. And when I
No.
say black, you got all parts of Africa,
Yeah.
West Indies, and British born, whatever you want to call yourself. But we're not all the same. That's the
Yeah.
fact.
We're not. No.
Africans and West Indians and British born,
Yeah.
we're not the same, and we
No.
don't. There are some commonalities in our behaviors and
Yeah.
mannerisms, but um, it's and it's
Incredibly different.
it's yeah. Well, it depends where you go. I mean, some I've worked in a local authority that is 90% white.
Mm.
I've worked in areas that are 98% white.
Mm.
Um, yeah. I've never really had a problem working with anyone though, because everyone's just shown a lot of love. And luckily, I've been fortunate in most places.
Yeah.
Apart from previous 2 jobs back, it wasn't very nice. But apart from that, and I think I'm just touching on something here. When we're sidetracking slightly. When George Floyd happened, and it was a time for everyone to ask some questions and have conversations. Local authorities start to do that. The one I was working
Yeah.
at, they did not know how to do it, and they didn't
Yeah.
ask. They just did their makeshift version
Yeah.
of inclusiveness, and it's like this is not about inclusiveness.
Yeah.
George Floyd raised questions around black people,
Yeah.
not everybody,
Yeah.
and they try to do it with everybody inclusive. So these are difficult discussions. That I know you're smiling. I know you got something to say. You know, okay.
Like, what was
Mm,
interesting for me, and I
mm.
don't know if this is because of it wasn't addressed.
Where
I
you
think there
were,
was one email from one leader talking about difficult times in very ambiguous terms, but it wasn't addressed at all. It
yeah.
wasn't addressed at all.
And you know what? I don't think minorities are asking for reparation as such. I'm talking about
I am
employees.
sorry.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't mind. But I don't think we're necessarily asking reparation. What we are happy to do is to have a conversation and be honest
Yeah.
about what you don't know.
Yeah.
Be honest about what you know. Just listen to where we're coming from, because minorities are. Um, we don't get to huddle up in a corner and cry. We have to get on with it,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't know unless you asked
Yeah.
what's really going on for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. It is and like you say, I'm not particularly mad at the makeup of my where I work, my workplace, because I think it is a matter of time.
Mm,
I think I'm an example of that. because as time has gone on, when I got there, I think there was one other black lady. She's now left. But I think it's literally a matter of time as we're getting students in. I think the majority of the students have been non-white. Yeah, bar one.
Again, another side note. I remember it's about 12 years ago. I had an infection in my finger. I nearly lost it, and it just happened out of the blue. And I went to Croydon It's now known as Croydon University Hospital. People do say that. I've never had a problem there though, and I've been there quite a lot.
I have some strong opinions.
Okay, so but the thing is, I've had a really good set of experiences there. I've got three.
You? The Lord has covered you.
No, listen. I must say, I've never. I've been covered.
You've been covered.
It's supernatural. I mean, I've heard a lot of bad reviews, but I haven't experienced that. Saying that, I went there. Oh, no, I'm going to tell this story. This has got nothing to do with the show. In this finger here, I don't know if you can see it. It just got an infection. Like it had pus inside it, but it was near the bone.
Okay.
So I went into A&E. I couldn't sleep. The pain was killing me. I mean, it was like somebody was constantly hammering it with a hammer.
From when you say near the bone.
Oh, but I didn't know at the time. So I literally took razors and started to slice my finger up to try and release some of the pus. A little bit came out, but of course, it was swollen to just a bit bigger than what it is.
Boy.
And let me tell you, and it's so. I mean, what they did was the surgery that they did on it. It's made some of it numb, so they've had to cut some nerves and so forth. But I went in there one day. They said, "Look, go home and take some antibiotics." I was like, "There's no way antibiotics going to fit this." Second day I went there. I spent basically 3 days in A&E. And then the surgeon said, "That's an infection. Let's deal with it. We've got to deal with it right now." And when he cut it open, obviously he had a couple of big injections in my hand. As soon as he cut it with his knife, I felt the pressure from my ear all the way down to my arm just release. I just felt I was like, this infection was going to kill me. It was strange, but it happened. Not one white member of staff apart from the surgeon.
Yeah.
That's Croydon. That's really what I was trying to say. I gave you a whole backstory, but
yeah.
So I live and I'm grateful that I live in a very diverse community. I love it, and when I move out of London, I'm going to miss it because I love diversity.
Yeah.
Down here, I guess. Also, I just wanted to probably ask you one more question, and it's a question that puts you in a position where you've got to, because you don't expect these questions.
Okay.
What would be the number one thing that you want to fix, and do you have a solution?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the staffing. I'd want to fix the staffing. I think I understand that we can't expect to pay more money. Yeah. That I am at peace with, because I don't think that's really what people want. But I do think that there are ways to make this job more rewarding and more sustainable and more attractive for people.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah. So one of the things that we've started to do is we're trying to support, really getting down to individuals when we're doing management, rather than making rules for everyone, really getting down to individuals and considering their specific interests, their specific goals. There's a lot of people who are very interested and passionate about research. So we're doing our best to try and support them doing research projects, doing things like that to say, okay, yes, we can't pay you more, but what we can do is we can link you up with XYZ, we can put you in touch with XYZ, and then you can have this time that we've allocated for you to go and do a bit of work on your passion,
Wow.
I think things like that. I think things like being more flexible. Obviously, the thing about health and social care is that it's 24-hour. Somebody always needs you. But I
So you
think
don't. Your job
sometimes
isn't your job is not 9 to 5.
my job is 9 to 5, but I just
Uh-huh.
mean generally,
Yeah.
in health and social care,
Mm.
people are going to need you 24 hours.
Right.
If
Yeah.
we opened a 24-hour service, it would get used,
Yeah.
you know. And I think that
Wow.
you cannot. This is what one of my aunts always says to me: you can't pour from an empty pot. You can't pour from an empty
Mm.
cup.
Mm.
And yes, people will need us all the time. However, I think if we prioritize our staff well-being a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
we will have a healthy, whole staff to look after these patients rather than staff that are stretched thin at the end of their tether, and one feather is going to just break them and they're going to rage quit because they've had enough of X, Y, Z, and da 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 da. I think we can do that by accommodating holidays. I think allowing people to be flexible in their working. I think if you've got
Yeah.
2 kids and they're in nursery, and you need to leave every day at 3 o'clock, but you're willing to come in for 7. Yes, our appointments are 9 till 5 for the moment, but there's something we could do with that time, I think
Instead of losing you.
instead of losing you, or instead of you
Mm.
thinking, no, there's no way that they could do that for me, so I'm just going to leave.
Mm.
I
Mm.
think if we had a culture of prioritizing our staff's needs and trying to cater to those needs as much as possible, I think that's a much better way to work.
That places value.
It places value. It says, we want you here,
Mm.
we want you to stay here, and we want you to be happy doing the work that you're doing and feel the benefits of helping people out. You don't want to get to a stage where you're working so hard that you forget it's even people that you're seeing and dealing with. I've been there. You're working late, you're missing lunch, and you go into
Mm.
survival mode and you forget at the end of your interaction is a human being.
Mm.
Yes, they're patients, but they're not just numbers. But I think I'd love to see uh, the way that employment happens. I'd love to see that culture change.
That is massive. I really wanted to do a lot of focus, and I will continue to do it. Social work is going through the same thing.
Mm.
Um, we're only lasting 2 to 5 years in the job, and then we're like, change of career, please. And I'm really making sure that I don't do that. I'm trying to make
Mm.
sure I don't do that. But it
Yeah.
drives you down that road. It's like you're in a
Yeah.
tube of toothpaste and you're being squeezed. Is where else can you
Yes.
go? But when you mention that whole well-being and how the corporation or institution can support that, because the job I'm leaving now, I didn't want to leave it. I've left it for certain reasons, but I really liked it.
Yeah.
I can say that there is not that investment,
Yeah.
and it's cheaper to invest than to just constantly just pull on a new raft of staff
I
who you're probably
agree.
paying more or take
Yeah.
it. I mean, we're recruiting internationally. It's like
Hold on.
it was cheaper to invest,
Yeah. It is. When I found out how much, I think to put an advert out is something like 10 or 20 grand.
to put an advert out.
Yeah, the whole recruitment process in terms of how much it costs to actually hire somebody.
And that 20 grand, that's just for one person. Oh, wow. So there's the wastage you're talking about, right?
When you start to hear, I am, but let me just put a disclaimer. I'm pulling that number from the recesses of my memory, and that cannot be trusted. However,
It's
I
grand.
remember being severely astounded at how much it costs.
It's
Because for
grand.
me, if it
It's grand.
like even if it's £1,000, that's £1,000 too much. It should cost about £150 to hire somebody.
I mean, they could
Why is
pay
it costing
me
that much?
half that. I will bring people through the door if they pay me. I could do it cheaper. That's what
Referral
I'm saying.
fees.
Yeah, I'll sort it out. Don't worry. I will do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just wonder what would it look like if, because we talk about valuing our staff, and they do things
Mm.
like have patients come back and say thank you, and
Yeah.
all of that is lovely.
Yeah.
But what if we were to just completely revolutionize it?
Mm.
just doing
Because
what needs
if
to be.
people like where they work, they don't want to leave, and they will
They
make every
don't.
effort to stay.
Yeah.
That's my strong belief. And I
Yeah.
think with me, looking at my well-being and what you're putting out, I'm just about to creep over the mid 40s now. So I don't have that stamina that youngers have to stick it out. I have to look after myself mentally because I'm afraid to fail. I'm afraid
Yeah.
to burn out. And
Yeah.
I reckon that if there was just I think that value is a bit like it acts as a painkiller.
Yeah.
You know, to the reality of how rough this can be. That's a really powerful and practical. I hope that managers will hear. I'm going to put this clip from this section out about what you said
Yeah.
about creating value for the staff, because I think they need to hear this, and I appreciate your time. Serena, we have to have you back. I say it to everybody that comes on, and I just, that's kind of twisting your arm live. You can say, would you come back? Because I know you have more insight for us, but I appreciate your time. One, in closing, one tip. Here we go. Here we go. One tip for your staff to maintain their well-being.
One tip for staff to maintain their will: I get help. Get the help that you need, whatever that looks like. Whether that's therapy, whether that's engaging in an exercise program. The fact is that we all know what we should be doing to look after ourselves.
There you go.
Prioritize that. Put it first. Every single time, put that first. Above everything.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you're offering less of yourself. And that's an injustice to people that you're serving.
Excellent. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your input. I appreciate your
Thanks for having
honesty.
me.
No worries. And they will never know, but we had to take some stuff out of this.
We did.
We did, but that's
A
all
bit
good.
too honest sometimes.
Yeah. Well, it's all right. That's why we pre-record, because it has to come out. But I appreciate your honesty, and it's been very insightful for us. We've covered so much, and that's why we have to have you back on the show. Guys, please share, please subscribe, please let others know about this. This is very helpful. This was a particularly helpful show. Please let others know. Students coming up, social workers in the game. Hopefully you learn from it. Thank you again, Serena. We'll see you all soon in the next show. Take care.